Today we're going to show you how to do your daily maintenance on your APQS long-arm quilting machine. With your long-arm quilting machine installation manual that you received, there is a recommended maintenance schedule section, and there is also a section that shows you how to do the maintenance on your machine. We like to keep our maintenance schedule separate on the back of our machine, so you are reminded each time you use your APQS machine to clean these areas. So with that, we're going to get started. The first item on here is to clean lint from your bobbin case. So I'm going to grab just a tooth or a Q-tip, and I'm going to wipe around the inside area. You'd be surprised how much lint gets built up in there, wiping the lint out. I'm also going to pull this flap up and get any lint that might be built up in there as well. Then I'm going to take a business card, and on the flap where your thread goes right here, I'm going to run my business card along there because lint can get built up in there as well, and then push that out. Okay, next on the list is to wipe the needle bar and wipe the hopping foot to remove any oil. This is your needle bar, so I'm going to manually move the needle bar down. You can see I've got lint built up around both my needle bar and my hopping foot. I want to wipe that hopping foot. That's from the hopping foot. Now I'm going to wipe my needle bar and removing any lint and built up oil from that area. We also like to take a toothbrush along these brushes down here. You see that lint down there? And we'll wipe that clean. This is between every quilting session that we're doing this, just to make sure that we keep lint off of our bearings inside of there. Let me grab the other side here real quick, just to get any built up lint out of there. Again, this is each quilting session. We're also going to check our oiling wicks with our fingers and oil if needed. So what I'm doing here, it's kind of difficult to see. I'm putting each of my fingers on the oiling wicks, and I'm looking for a shine on my fingertips. If you don't see a shine on there, you would add 1 to 2 drops of oil that came with your long arm machine. I'll go ahead and do this so you can see. Just 1 to 2 drops. And when you're doing this, make sure you're not doing this when you've got a quilt on your frame, or make sure your head is moved out of the way when you're doing this. Okay, so that was between each quilting session. Between every quilt, or 8 to 10 hours of use. So if you've got a quilt that you've been working on for a long time and you've been using your machine every 8 to 10 hours, you need to do these steps, and it's the second section in your recommended maintenance schedule. Clean and oil the machine as described in your manual. In our Linny and Lucy manual, there is a section that tells you exactly what to do and how often you need to do it, checking your oiling wicks, where to oil and clean the hook assembly, and adding WD-40 to your machine. So I'm going to run through each of these steps, but it is in your manual, so please get your manual out and look at the details in there. So before I get started, I want to make sure that my thread is out of my take-up assembly right here. So I'm going to pull my thread out to make sure that it's not inserted in there, because if you left your machine running in manual mode with your thread in this take-up assembly, thread could get sucked into this area right here around your flywheel, and then that's a whole other mess that you'd have to clean up. So we just remove our thread from that take-up assembly right there. And I'm going to take my machine, depending on the machine model. This is a Millie. I'm going to take it out of stitch regulated. Now I'm going to slow my motor down. So on a Linny and Lucy, your button on the side takes it out of stitch regulation, and then you slow the motor speed down. So before I get started here, let me get my needle up. So first I'm blowing compressed air or canned air into my hook assembly area to get rid of any lint fibers. So remember, my machine is in manual mode, non-stitch regulated, and I've slowed the motor down. So So first I'm going to place a paper towel underneath of the hook assembly area to catch any WD-40 or oil that's coming through. I'm going to turn my motor on, and I'm going to spray a good douse of WD-40 into my hook assembly area. And what that's doing is breaking down any lint fibers that might be in your hook assembly area. Okay. So after I've let that run, I'm going to take a paper towel, and I'm going to keep my hands away from my on-off switches or my needle down, needle up for safety reasons. I'm going to wrap the paper towel around my finger, and I'm going to wipe down my hook assembly area to try to get any of that excess WD-40 out of there. I'm also going to wipe around my hook assembly to get any of the excess splatter out of my housing area. This is a 2014 Millennium, so she still has a gearbox at the bottom, and I'm actually going to go in and wipe down the bottom of my machine, and that's normal if you've got any grease areas. I'm just trying to keep it as clean as possible in there. So after we've done our WD-40 and cleaned out the hook area, this is how we do it at our store, because we know we've got excess WD-40 and probably lint behind our needle plate right here. So we're going to move the needle plate off to the side. Your machine may be a little bit different and have more screws on the needle plate. This year and model of Millie has washers. So I'm going to move this out to the side and just tighten it down so it doesn't come back while my machine is running. So now I'm going to wipe down the bottom of my needle plate, and you can see that I get lint buildup underneath of there as well as the WD-40. Before I clean all of this up, I'm actually going to oil my hook assembly. This is how we do it at our store. You can also oil the hook assembly as stated in your manual. There's a slot inside of your hook assembly that you can do this to. We just like to, when we clean the machines, we like to get this excess lint out of it when we're actually doing so. When we're cleaning. So I'm going to take my oil spout and I'm going to put a few drops in here until I start to see drops come out of the bottom. So I'm putting it on that black race. See, I can see drops of oil coming out the bottom on my paper towel. Before I run the machine, I'm either going to move my flywheel in the up position a few times to make sure that it gets good and saturated around that hook assembly. If you find that your flywheel is too hard to move, just do a needle down, needle up. Do that 5 or 6 times to make sure that the oil gets good and distributed. When you're doing this again, make sure that you're not over a quilt. If you are, make sure that you've got your quilt covered with paper towels so that there's going to be oil splatter as soon as I start running the machine. So again, I'm going to let that run for about 15 seconds. That beeping is my thread break sensor telling me I don't have thread. So once that's finished, I'm going to stop the motor. Again, keeping my hands away from my switches, I'm going to take a clean part of my paper towel and go around that hook assembly area to get any excess oil out of the inside of that hook. And then again, I'm going to wipe down my hook assembly and the inside housing to get any excess oil off of there. Now I'm going to wipe down this area underneath of the needle plate. Okay, so after I've oiled my hook assembly and I put my needle plate back in place, I want to pick up my paper towel and then I want to wipe down just any excess oil that may have fallen onto your carriage real quick. So now we're going to change our needle. Again, this is between every 8 to 10 hours of use. APQS recommends, and this is in your manual under Quick Troubleshooting Guide, recommends to not use titanium or gold colored needles. Do not use titanium or gold colored needles. We sell needles at our store. APQS sells needles, and most other dealers in the APQS network sells the appropriate needles for your machine. So first I'm going to take my needle out. And then with the new needle, this is a 4.0 Gross Beckart needle. So APQS needles, you see this scarf on the back of the needle. That goes towards the back of your machine. When I say the scarf, I'm talking about this curved part right here. So when I roll this over to the front, you can run your fingernail down the front of the needle. So as I'm inserting the needle, I'm making sure that I've got that groove in the front of my needle right here, and the curvature part is to the back of my machine. So I'm going to insert that. Make sure that I've got it seated properly into my needle bar. We use straight pins here. I'm going to stick a straight pin into that needle hole to make sure that I am at the 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock position right here, and to make sure that the needle is seated properly into the needle bar. So I'm going to finger tighten that down, grab my screwdriver and tighten it. Okay. Now before I start running the machine, I like to, just to make sure that I've got it seated in the needle bar, I like to rotate my flywheel one rotation to make sure that my needle is seated and I'm not going to hit my hook assembly. So lint can also get built up between your tension discs right here, so it's also recommended, again, every 8 to 10 hours to get your canned air or your compressed air. Pull those tension discs apart. You see the, gosh, you can see it right there. You see the lint? So what I'm going to do here, try to do, so we can still get this on camera, is pull my plates apart and blow compressed air. And now get my thread untangled. So now we're going to clean off our carriage and our wheels. When we talk about our wheels, most of the weight of, well, all of the weight of your head of your machine is resting on that top part of your wheels back here, your M&M wheels. So what we like to use here is just what we're told to use is rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip. So I'm going to soak down my Q-tip with rubbing alcohol. Now I'm going to take my Q-tip and I'm going to rest it on the top part of my M&M wheels. Millie's going to have a lot more oxidation than your newer machines. So this will come back black. I'm just making sure that I've got any rough bits taken off of my M&M wheels. Now I'm just going to turn that Q-tip over and I'm going to get my back wheels and do the same thing. I'm pushing up. Now I am going to take my rubbing alcohol. I would get the other side as well with my Q-tip. So I'm going to take my rubbing alcohol on a paper towel. Now I'm going to clean off my carriage to make sure that I've got any roughness taken off of my carriage, oxidation. It's a normal occurrence. So my paper towel is going to come back a little black. Now I'm going to get the back of the carriage. This will keep your machine running smoothly and gliding across that carriage for years. Just keeping it clean. So now I'm going to wipe down the table and wipe down my bliss rails. So we just use a household cleaner for our tabletop area, the Lexan, just to dust it off, keep any lint, as you know, batting, everything, dust, just to keep the house clean around here, right? So after we've done that, then we're going to take another paper towel with, again, some isopropyl alcohol is recommended. So I'm going to put this on my paper towel, and I'm going to wipe down my bliss rails to remove any oxidation. So I'm putting that on there, and I'm just going to wipe this all the way across to make sure. You'd be surprised what a little piece of thread on that rail can do to your quilting. Just to keep that clean and smooth. And again, you're going to come back with a little bit of oxidation on there, which is normal. So you would go through and do the same thing with the front rail and your entire table area. And there you go.